Hey everyone, welcome to today's spine-chilling stories. Have you ever felt like something was watching you in an empty house? Or received a phone call that just didn't sit right? In these two terrifying tales, we'll explore creepy house-sitting encounters and mysterious phone calls that lead to something far worse. What would you do if the darkness felt alive? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's dive in, if you dare. It was supposed to be an easy guidehouse, sitting for the Andersons while they took their yearly vacation. The pay was good, and the house, though massive and a little old, was quiet, peaceful. Or so I thought. I was just 22, juggling college and a few side hustles to make ends meet. The Andersons were the perfect clients, with 4 Comcats and a large, well-kept house in Santa Monica. The first few days were uneventful. I'd wake up early, walk to my classes, and return to the house in the afternoon. The cats, Max included, would be lounging in various corners, and everything seemed normal. But after a few nights, something shifted. I'm not sure if it was the eerie stillness that hung in the air, or the way the house seemed to creak in the dark, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One night, my boyfriend Jake came over to keep me company. We'd eaten dinner and were watching television in the living room, and while he was there, everything felt fine. He stayed for a few hours, but as midnight approached, he got up to leave. I could see something was bothering him, though. His eyes darted nervously around the room, and he said, "I don't know, Kel. Something just doesn't feel right tonight. Maybe you should come home with me." I brushed it off. I had a strained relationship with my parents, and honestly, I didn't want to go back to that house. I liked the silence here, even if it was unsettling. I reassured him, locked up, and went to bed. That's when it started. I was lying there in the dark, the quiet of the house wrapping around me like a blanket when the television, which had been turned off, flickered back on. At first, I thought I'd accidentally hit the remote, but no, it was sitting on the nightstand, untouched. I clicked it off again, but the screen flashed back on, the image flickering in static, like the signal was lost. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The remote was right there. I was sure I had turned it off, but it didn't matter. I unplugged the television, hoping to silence it once and for all, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I lay there, trying to ignore the dread pooling in my stomach. Something was in this house. Something I couldn't explain, and it wasn't leaving anytime soon. The next day, I tried to shake off the unease that had settled in my bones. I told Jake about the television incident, and he simply shook his head, urging me to leave the house and stay with him. But I couldn't. This was my chance to escape my own turbulent home life, even if it meant staying in a house that felt more like a prison each day. By evening, I was alone again, sitting in the guest bedroom, scrolling through my phone. But that same feeling, that sense of being watched, crept back into my mind. I tried to ignore it. I was so used to the house's odd creaks and groans by now. But tonight, something felt different, darker. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the house seemed to hold its breath. Then came the sound. At first, I thought I was imagining it, a faint, high-pitched noise, like a baby crying. I stood frozen, listening, heart pounding. It wasn't the cats. I knew their sounds well. This was something different. I hurried down the stairs, trying to dismiss the growing sense of dread that was clawing at me. The crying grew louder as I approached the basement door, chilling me to the core. My mind screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. I opened the door, my breath shallow, and there was nothing. No crying, no cat. Only the silence of the dark basement staring back at me. But when I turned to leave, I felt it again, a shadow at the edge of my vision. Something moving, something waiting. And that was when I knew I wasn't alone. I rushed back upstairs, my heart hammering in my chest. The basement door creaked shut behind me, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something or someone standing there. But the hallway was empty. The silence was thick, oppressive, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, the isolation, the stress. But as I sat back down on the couch, The air in the room felt heavier, almost suffocating. The soft hum of the house's old ventilation system was the only sound, but even that felt too loud now, echoing in my ears like an unwanted presence. I turned on the television to distract myself, but the static-filled image blinked back at me again, as though mocking my attempts to escape the creeping unease. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I nearly jumped, startled. It was Jake, asking if everything was okay. I typed back, trying to sound calm, assuring him I was fine, but I wasn't. Then, the crying started again. This time, it was louder, more frantic, like a child in distress. I froze, my blood turning cold as the sound seemed to come from right behind me. I spun around, expecting to see one of the cats, or perhaps Max. But there was nothing but the deafening silence, and the creeping, unshakable feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to leave. I grabbed my bag and threw in anything I could, my phone, wallet, a jacket. I couldn't leave fast enough. Every step I took felt like it echoed through the empty house, the tension building with every sound, every creak. I moved quickly, but my legs felt like lead, as if the house itself was trying to hold me back, to keep me in its grip. As I passed the living room, I glanced toward the basement door. It stood slightly ajar, the darkness behind it almost swallowing the light from the hallway. The air felt thick, like it was pressing in on me, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move in the dark. I froze, heart racing. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to dismiss it just another trick of the light. But the shadows, they were different tonight. I hurried toward the front door, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. As I unlocked it, the house seemed to grow colder, the silence deafening. And then, from behind me, I heard it again, the crying, more desperate now, as if it was right behind me, breathing down my neck. I turned. Nothing. The house was empty. I didn't wait. I ran out the door, not even bothering to lock it behind me. The only thing I cared about was getting away, leaving that house far, far behind me. I drove, my hands tight on the wheel, the sound of my heartbeat drowning out everything else. But even as I sped away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, something that hadn't let me go. I didn't look back once I got in my car, but I felt its eyes on me. Whatever it was, I could feel it there. The drive felt endless, and the further I got from the Andersons' house, the more I could feel the weight in my chest start to lift. But the dread lingered, creeping in like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I tried to convince myself it was just the fear of the unknown, the unsettling feeling of being alone in an old house. Deep down, I knew it was more than that. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a moment, hands shaking on the steering wheel. My heart still raced. The house was quiet, too quiet. The fear, though distant now, was still in my veins. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, making sure the door was locked behind me. I sent a quick text to Jake, telling him I was home, that I was okay, but I wasn't. I went inside, locked every door, double-checked the windows, and sank down on the couch. The house felt safe, but the feeling that something was still out there, watching, never left. I tried to sleep, but tossed and turned all night, the sounds of crying echoing in my mind. The next morning, I called the Andersons, left the keys in their hiding spot, and never went back. I couldn't explain what happened, but I knew one thing for sure. That house wasn't just haunted by memories, it was haunted by something far darker. Days passed since I left the Andersons' house, but the unease never truly faded. I tried to push it to the back of my mind, focusing on school and daily life, but every creak, every shadow, made my heart race. I found myself constantly checking behind me, as though expecting to see something or someone lurking just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one who had experienced something strange in that house. I called my sibling, desperate for reassurance, only to hear a voice full of hesitation on the other end. They admitted they had experienced something similar in that very house, but they hadn't said anything to me before because they didn't want to scare me while I was saving money to move out. It made my stomach drop, so it wasn't just me. I felt a chill as the pieces began to fall into place. The crying sounds, the shadow moving in the dark, the television turning on by itself, it all made sense now. Something malevolent had been lurking in that house. Something that fed on fear. Something that wanted to stay hidden, waiting for someone like me to come in. It wasn't just a haunted house. It was a house with a dark history. One that had been building up for years, piece by piece, until I had stumbled right into its trap. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence was deafening. But as I closed my eyes, I could have sworn I heard the faintest sound, just like before, the sound of a faint cry, calling from somewhere in the dark. The sound echoed in my mind long after it faded into silence. A faint cry, so far away, yet so close. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself that it was just the house settling, but the fear gnawed at my insides. It wasn't just the house, it was something else. Something that had never left. I lay awake for hours, listening to the quiet, my pulse thrumming in my ears. My mind replayed everything that had happened in the Andersons' house, the television flickering on by itself, the crying, the shadow in the corner. Had I imagined it all? Maybe it was just a series of strange coincidences, my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew the house had been hiding something far worse than I had realized. The next day, I decided to go back. Not to the house, but to the neighborhood, to get answers. I needed to know what was really going on in that place, why it had felt so suffocating, so alive with something evil. Maybe someone in the area knew more. Maybe they'd seen something strange, heard something that could explain what I had felt. As I stood on the sidewalk in front of the house, I felt the weight of the place pressing down on me. A chill ran through my spine, and I knew without a doubt that I was being watched. The house loomed before me, dark and silent, but I could almost feel the malevolent presence lurking behind its walls, waiting for me to come closer. And I knew I had never truly left. It was supposed to be a simple, quiet night of house sitting for the Thompsons, but nothing was ever simple about that night. I was 17, just trying to make a little extra cash before college, and the Thompson family was out of town. They'd left me their house and their pets, Buddy the dog, and their 2 cats, with strict instructions to keep everything in order. It was the perfect Sedipan empty house, some downtime, and a peaceful neighborhood in San Francisco. But that's not what I got. The night started like any other. I invited my 2 best friends, Haley and Sam, to join me. We set up in the sunroom, lit up a joint, and cracked open a bottle of vodka. We talked, laughed, and caught up on life. We weren't doing anything wrong, but even then, something about the house made me feel uneasy. The stillness, the way the rooms seemed too quiet, even though they were full of life. Then, the phone rang. I froze, staring at the wall as if the sound would stop if I ignored it long enough. The Thompsons had disconnected their landline months ago, or so I thought. But here it was, ringing, a hollow sound that echoed through the empty house. Sam, already tipsy, reached for the phone, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted it to her ear. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "Hello?" A man's voice, low and urgent, came through the receiver. "I've got your boss's wallet. It's at a gas station about 25 minutes from the house. You need to come pick it up." We all looked at each other, confused. It made no sense. Why would someone be calling about a wallet in the middle of the night? We tried to brush it off, thinking it was some kind of prank. But the calls didn't stop, and they weren't leaving messages. Each one became more frantic, more insistent. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Something wasn't right. I looked at Haley and Sam, both of us silently wondering if we should just leave. But it was already too late. Something was watching us, something that had been hiding in the shadows all along. The calls kept coming. Each time, the man's voice grew more desperate, more demanding. "You need to come now. It's urgent," he repeated. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the tension in the air thickening like a fog. Sam tried to end the call, but it only rang again, immediately. We all exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to call the police, but we didn't even know where the wallet really was. Just a random gas station 25 minutes away. Was it even real? Or were we being toyed with? Haley, sensing the shift in the mood, grabbed Buddy, the dog, and went to the back to check the yard. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, but it wasn't the sound that unsettled Mate. It was the silence that followed. In the stillness, every creak, every gust of wind outside felt amplified. Suddenly, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the same voice. It was a deep, grating laugh followed by static before the line went dead. I stood there frozen, barely able to breathe. "What the hell was that?" Sam whispered, her voice trembling. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A dark figure, standing motionless by the kitchen doorway, a silhouette against the dim light. My breath caught in my throat. It was too dark to see clearly, but I could feel its presence, the weight of it. I opened my mouth to scream, but the words never came. My heart raced as I stared at the shadow in the doorway. It didn't move, but I could feel it there, watching me. It was as though the air itself had thickened, choking me with fear. Sam saw me freeze, her eyes widening as she turned to look. But by the time she glanced back to where I was staring, the figure was gone. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, my throat tight with panic. "See what?" she replied, her voice shaky. I don't know. There was something in the doorway. A person. But when I glanced again, the hallway was empty. My mind was racing, trying to process what I had just seen. Was I imagining things? Had the fear from the calls gotten to me? But then, just as I started to breathe again, there was a soft scratching sound from the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable sound of the back door creaking open. My blood ran cold. I motioned for Sam to stay silent, my finger pressed to my lips. We crept slowly toward the back of the house, the silence almost unbearable. The door wasn't fully open, but it was enough to let in a cool draft. We were not alone. Sam took a hesitant step forward, her hand shaking as she reached for the door. Then, suddenly, the low laugh echoed again, coming from the darkened corner of the kitchen. I didn't need to see the figure to know it was real. Something was here, something that shouldn't be, and it wasn't leaving. The laugh echoed in the kitchen, sending a chill straight down my spine. It was a guttural sound, like someone was mocking us from the shadows, but there was no one there. My breath caught in my throat as I took a step back, barely able to breathe. Sam, wide-eyed and trembling, clutched Buddy the dog tighter. He growled low in his throat, his fur standing on end, his body tense. The air was heavy, like a storm was about to break. I slowly edged toward the kitchen, my feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. Each step felt like it was leading me deeper into the unknown, but I had to know what was going on. Sam stayed behind me, whispering my name in a voice that was barely audible. "Emily, don't," she urged, fear lacing her words. But I didn't stop. We had to know. When we reached the kitchen doorway, the low growl of Buddy was the only sound, cutting through the silence. The back door was open, the moonlight casting a faint glow inside, but there was no sign of anyone. No shadows, no footsteps, just the wind moving the curtains. I turned, ready to tell Sam it was all in our heads, when I heard it again. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, coming from behind me. I whipped around, my heart racing, but the kitchen was still empty. I felt it then, the unmistakable sensation of eyes on me, watching, waiting. We weren't alone, and whatever was here was getting closer. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, threatening to choke me. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. I turned back to Sam, who was standing frozen in place, her wide eyes locked on the darkness. The feeling of being watched intensified, pressing in from every angle. I could hear my own shallow breaths, but it felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. We needed to get out of there. I took a step toward the door, but then crack. A sudden noise, sharp and loud, coming from the back hallway. I spun around, my heart skipping a beat. The shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, as if they were alive, moving. "Emily," Sam whispered, her voice shaky. "We need to go, now." I didn't hesitate. We backed away slowly, eyes darting around, watching for any movement. Buddy growled again, louder this time, and I could feel his anxiety seeping into my own veins. Something was closing in on us. We reached the front door, and I fumbled for the lock, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I heard another creak, this time from the stairs leading up to the second floor. My stomach dropped. Someone or something was upstairs, but we were too close to the door to run upstairs and investigate. With a final, desperate yank, I threw open the door. The cold night air hit my face as we bolted outside, our footsteps loud and fast on the pavement. The house loomed behind us, silent again, but the feeling of being followed didn't stop. It never stopped. We had to leave, and never look back. We ran down the street, our hearts pounding as we sprinted away from the house. The cool night air felt like it could never be cold enough to chase away the burning fear that clung to our skin. My mind raced, replaying everything that had happened those calls, the eerie laugh, the shadow in the kitchen. I could still hear the faintest echo of footsteps behind us, though I knew no one was there. It was as if the darkness itself was pursuing us. We didn't stop until we reached Haley's car, parked a few blocks away. We jumped in without a word, the engine roaring to life as I slammed the door shut. My hands gripped the seat, knuckles white, as the car sped down the empty streets. My breath was still ragged, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was right behind us, just out of sight, but always close enough to feel. The city lights blurred past, but even as we drove further away from the house, I couldn't escape the sense of dread creeping over me. It was like the house had followed us, like something had latched onto us and wouldn't let go. I turned to Sam, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with unspoken fear. "We have to call the police," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. I shook my head, my throat tight. "I don't think they'll believe us." No one would. The silence in the car was suffocating. The house was behind us, but the terror was still there, lingering in the dark. The further we drove, the more I could feel the tension start to ease, but the fear was still there, gnawing at my insides. We made it to Haley's apartment in silence, but the air felt suffocating, heavy with what we had just experienced. We parked and sat in the car for a moment, neither of us willing to be the first to speak. The night had turned into something out of a nightmare, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't over. "I don't feel safe," Sam finally whispered, her voice trembling. "We're not safe." I turned to her, wanting to reassure her, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt the same way. We had escaped, but the fear of the present still clung to us like a second skin. "We need to get out of here," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "We shouldn't have stayed. Something's wrong with that house. We need to tell someone." But who could we tell? The police wouldn't believe us. The strange phone calls, the figure in the kitchen, the laughter, they'd write it off as paranoia or some stupid prank. No one would understand the feeling of something watching you, stalking you from the shadows. I got out of the car and looked up at the apartment building. The safety of it felt like a distant memory, a false comfort. I turned back to Sam, and for the first time, I realized she was staring behind us, her face pale as a ghost. "Do you hear that?" she asked, barely audible. I froze. From the direction we had come, there was a faint sound. Footsteps, closing in. "So, what do you think? Could you stay in a house where every creak and shadow feels like it's hiding something? Or would you run just like our stories did? Have you ever experienced something that made you question what's lurking in the dark? Let us know in the comments if you've had a creepy encounter of your own, or if there's a terrifying story you want us to tell. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales. Stay safe. And remember, the darkness is always watching.